Learn how to crochet a snowflake blanket with this Snowflake Granny Square Blanket crochet pattern. This is one of my absolute favorite crochet blanket patterns. It's simple yet eye-catching with a beautiful snowflake design that's perfect for winter or Christmas. I loved it so much that I made it 3 times as a cozy and classic winter snowflake blanket, as a festive Christmas snowflake blanket, and as a soft and snuggly snowflake blanket made with chenille style yarn. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this snowflake blanket from start to finish, including how to make the squares, how to assemble and join the squares, and how to add the border. This pattern is available for free on my website, and there's a link to the free written pattern in the description below this video. For this pattern, you can use any size 4 medium weight yarn. For a hook size, use an H hook for the entire pattern. In this video tutorial, I'm reusing some footage from my snowflake coasters, as the instructions for the first 4 rounds are exactly the same. And you may notice a different hook size being shown. Just ignore that, and for this blanket, use an H hook. We are going to start by making the squares. I made 25 squares in total. We are going to start by using color A. As seen in these photos, I used white yarn for color A. However, for this video tutorial, I'm going to use this blue yarn for color A, just so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. With our color A, we're going to start by making a magic circle. This is how I make a magic circle. I have another video showing how to do this step by step slowly that I'll link to in the description below this video. To start round 1, we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to complete the following instructions a total of 7 times. The first step is to make a half double crochet stitch, working into the magic circle, yarn over, insert your hook into the magic circle, yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull yarn through all 3 loops. And there's our first half double crochet stitch. The next step is to chain 1. We are going to complete those steps a total of 7 times. We've now done it once. Working into the magic circle, half double crochet, and chain 1. We've now completed those steps twice. You go ahead and complete them a total of 7 times. You should now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 half double crochet stitches. And after each of those half double crochet stitches, a chain 1. Now we're going to pull the end of the magic circle tight to close. And to join the round, we are going to slip stitch into the space between the 3 chains we made at the start and our first half double crochet stitch. This is the chain 3 space. Working into this chain 3 space, insert your hook and slip stitch to join. To start round 2, we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. We are not going to turn. We are going to work into the first or the same chain 3 space that we just slip stitched into. Into this chain 3 space, we are going to double crochet. Yarn over, insert your hook into the chain 3 space, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, bring the yarn through the first 2 loops. Yarn over, bring the yarn through the remaining 2 loops. And there's our double crochet stitch. For the rest of the round, we're going to be repeating the following instructions. We are going to work into the next chain 1 space. This is a space underneath where we made a chain 1 in between half double crochet stitches. This is our first of 7 chain 1 spaces that we'll be working into. We're not working into tops of stitches. We're going right underneath the chain 1 in between the half double crochet stitches, and into this space we're going to do the following. In the chain 1 space we are going to double crochet, chain 1, and still working in the same chain 1 space, make another double crochet stitch. And these are the steps we're going to be repeating all the way around. We've just worked in our first of 7 chain 1 spaces, working in the next chain 1 space, into this space, double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet in the same space. You go ahead and repeat those steps all the way around. I'm almost finished working all the way around. I've just finished working in the 6th chain 1 space. I have one last chain 1 space to work into. The last chain 1 space is between the last half double crochet stitch made in the previous round and the starting chain 3 from the previous round, and it's underneath that last chain 1 that we made before joining. Working right into this last chain 1 space, we complete the same steps. Double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet in the same space. At the end of this round, you should have 15 double crochet stitches. Here was our first, and then we made 2 in each chain 1 space. To join, we are going to slip stitch into the space between our 3 starting chains and our first double crochet stitch. Into this chain 3 space, we're going to slip stitch to join. To start round 3, we're going to chain 2. 1, 2. We're going to start by working into the chain 3 space. This is the space that we just slip stitched into. Into this chain 3 space, we are going to double crochet, insert your hook into the chain 3 space, and double crochet. Now we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and still working into the chain 3 space, we're going to make 2 double crochet stitches. There's 1. And there's 2. Now we're going to begin the repeat portion of the round. In the next chain 1 space, the space between the double crochet stitches made in the same space in the previous round under that chain 1, and just to make sure you're working the right space, it's not between these double crochet stitches. We are going to work into the chain 1 space, which is under the chain 1, right here. Into this chain 1 space, make 2 double crochet stitches. There's 1. In the same space, make another. There's 2. Now we're going to chain 2. And in the same space, we're going to make 2 more double crochet stitches. There's 1. Make another. And there's 2. These are the steps we're going to be repeating all the way around, working into the next chain 1 space, into this space, make 2 double crochet stitches. There's 2. chain 2, and in the same space, make 2 more. We've just worked in the first 2 chain 1 spaces. You go ahead and work in the remaining 5 chain 1 spaces. I'm almost finished working all the way around. I've worked in 6 chain 1 spaces so far. I have one last chain 1 space to work into. Nothing special happens, but let's finish the round together. Make 2 double crochet stitches, chain 2, and in the same space, make 2 more double crochet stitches. To finish the round, we're going to slip stitch in the top of the first double crochet stitch that we made in this round, working under the top 2 loops of this first double crochet stitch. Working the top of this first stitch, slip stitch to join. At the end of this round, you should have 31 double crochet stitches. We also now have 8 chain 2 spaces. The chain 2 that we made at the very beginning of the round does not create a chain 2 space. Our first chain 2 space that we've made is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. To start round 4, the first thing we're going to do is slip stitch into the first chain 2 space. Working into this first chain 2 space, slip stitch. Now we're going to chain 2, and we're going to continue working in this first or the same chain 2 space. In this first chain 2 space, we're going to make 2 double crochet stitches. There's 1, and there's 2. Now we're going to chain 2, and we're going to keep working in this chain 2 space. And we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches all in the same space. There's 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to begin the repeat portion of the round. And in this round, we're going to be working into the chain 2 spaces. In the next chain 2 space, we are going to make 3 double crochet stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Now chain 2, and in the same space, make 3 more double crochet stitches. There's 1, 2, and 3. These are the steps you're going to be repeating in each chain 2 space all the way around. Let's do one more together. Working in the next chain 2 space, we are going to make our 3 double crochet stitches. There's 3. Now chain 2, and make 3 more double crochet stitches. You go ahead and repeat those steps in the remaining 5 chain 2 spaces. I'm almost finished working all the way around. I've worked in 7 chain 2 spaces so far. I have one last chain 2 space to work into. Nothing special happens. You still make 3 double crochet stitches, then chain 2, and make 3 more double crochet stitches all in the same space. To finish the round, we're going to slip stitch into the top of the first double crochet stitch that we made in the round to join. Working the top of this first double crochet stitch, slip stitch to join. For an easy way to count our stitches, we made 6 double crochet stitches in 7 chain 2 spaces. 6 times 7 is 42, and in the first chain 2 space we made 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochet stitches, so we have a total of 47 double crochet stitches completed at the end of this round. We also have a total of 8 chain 2 spaces. Now we're going to fasten off color A, simply meaning to cut the yarn that's attached to your skein. Pull the end through the loop that was on your hook and pull tight. We are now going to start round 5. The first thing we're going to do is attach color B. On the screen are the colors that I used when making each of the blankets. For this video tutorial, I'm going to use this green color from my color B, just so it's easy for you to see what I'm doing. To attach your color B, insert your hook into the first chain 2 space. Here's where we just slip stitched to joined, and then we fastened off our color A. Here is the first chain 2 space. This is the space under the 2 chains, and we're going to insert our hook right here. Insert your hook into the first chain 2 space. Place your color B on your hook and pull it through the space. A quick note that you're going to continue using color B for the rest of the square. Now we're going to chain 1. We are going to go right into the repeat portion of the round. The repeat starts by making a single crochet in the chain 2 space. The first time we do this, this is the same chain 2 space that we just attached color B to. In this chain 2 space, single crochet. Next, we are going to work in between the next 2 stitches, inserting our hook in between the posts of these stitches, right here. We're not working into tops of stitches, we're working in between these stitches. We're going to insert our hook in between these 2 stitches and half double crochet. Next, we are going to insert our hook in between the next 2 stitches. Once again, not working into tops of stitches, in between these stitches, we are going to double crochet. Now we're going to work into the space between clusters. When I say cluster, I mean a group of 3 double crochet stitches. And here's the space in between these 3 double crochet stitches and these 3 double crochet stitches. We are going to work in this space, and we are going to make a triple crochet stitch into this space. Some people call them treble crochet stitches. I call them triple, and here's how to make one. Yarn over twice. Insert your hook into this space between the clusters. Yarn over, pull up a loop, 4 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull the yarn through the first 2 loops. 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull the yarn through the first 2 loops. 2 loops left. Yarn over and pull the yarn through the 2 remaining loops. There's our triple crochet stitch. Next, we're going to work in between the next 2 stitches, inserting our hook in between the posts of these stitches. And in between the next 2 stitches, we are going to double crochet. Next, we're going to work in between the next 2 stitches. Insert your hook between the posts of the next 2 stitches and double crochet. Now we're going to work into the chain 2 space. We're going to insert our hook right into the space. And into this chain 2 space, we're going to do a number of things. First thing we're going to do is make 2 double crochet stitches. There's one. Let's make another. Now we have 2 double crochet stitches. Now we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and still working into the same chain 2 space, make 2 more double crochet stitches. There's one. And there's 2. Continuing along with our repeat, we're going to work in between the next 2 stitches. Inserting our hook in between the next 2 stitches, we are going to double crochet. Now we're going to work in between the next 2 stitches. In between these 2 stitches, once again, we're going to double crochet. Now we're going to work into the space between clusters. Into this space, we are going to triple crochet. Now we're going to work in between the next 2 stitches. In between the next 2 stitches, we are going to double crochet. And the last step in the repeat is to work in between the next 2 stitches. Working in between the next 2 stitches, half double crochet. These are the steps we're going to repeat all the way around. Let's do it one more time together. Working in the chain 2 space, single crochet. Working in between the next 2 stitches, half double crochet. Working in between the next 2 stitches, double crochet. Working in the space between clusters, triple crochet. Working in between the next 2 stitches, double crochet. Working in between the next 2 stitches, double crochet. Working into the chain 2 space, make 2 double crochet stitches. There's 2. Chain 2, 1, 2, and still in the same chain 2 space, make 2 more double crochet stitches, and there's 2. Working in between the next 2 stitches, double crochet. Working in between the next 2 stitches, double crochet. Working in the space between clusters, we are going to triple crochet. Working in between the next 2 stitches, double crochet. And the last step is to work between the next 2 stitches and half double crochet. You go ahead and repeat those steps all the way around. I'm almost finished working all the way around. Here was my final triple crochet stitch, and I have 2 more stitches to make. I still need to make a double crochet stitch and then a half double crochet stitch to finish the repeat. I wanted to point out that right here is the starting chain 2 that we made at the start of round 4. And in this round, we're treating this starting chain 2 just like a normal double crochet stitch. As you can see, I still made a triple crochet in the space between these clusters. And when I go to work in between the next 2 stitches, I'm still making my double crochet stitch like I normally would in between 2 stitches. I'll show you quickly how I'm finishing the round. In between the next 2 stitches, double crochet. And in between the next 2 stitches, half double crochet. At the end of this round, you should have a total of 60 stitches. That's not counting any chains. Chain 1 we made at the beginning, not counting that, not counting these chain 2s, just counting all the stitches. You also have 4 chain 2 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. To finish the round, we're going to work into the top of the first single crochet stitch that we made in the round. And into the top of this first single crochet stitch, we are going to slip stitch to join. It's absolutely okay if your work is looking slightly misshapen after this round. After the next round, the final round of the square, it will become more square. It just looks a little odd after this round, and that's absolutely okay. It's also okay for the place where you attached color B to be very loose. It will tighten up once you weave in your loose ends. To start round 6, we're going to chain 2. 1, 2. We are going to double crochet in the first 8 stitches. Our first stitch that we're going to work into is the very first stitch. This is the same stitch we just slip stitched into, the same stitch that's attached to this chain 2. In this first stitch, we are going to double crochet. There's our first of 8. In the next stitch, make our second of 8. In the next stitch, make our third of 8. Then fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and 8. Next, we're going to be working into the chain 2 space. Before we get to what we're going to actually be doing in this chain 2 space, After we work in the chain 2 space, we are going to be skipping the next stitch. Here's the next stitch after the chain 2 space. We are not going to be working into this stitch. After working in the chain 2 space, this stitch gets covered. It's going to be harder to see this stitch, so I wanted to point out that this is the stitch we're going to be skipping after working into the chain 2 space. Into this chain 2 space, the first thing we're going to do is make 3 double crochet stitches. There's 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and still in the same space, make 3 double crochet stitches. There's 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to begin the repeat portion of the round. The first step in our repeat is to skip the next stitch. As I mentioned, we're going to skip this stitch and not work into the top of it. So you can see here the top of this stitch is now a bit covered by after working in the chain 2 space. This is the stitch we are skipping. We are going to double crochet in the next 14 stitches, starting with the stitch after the stitch we skip. So starting here is our first of 14 double crochet stitches. Skipping the next stitch, in the next stitch, make our first of 14, and continue making double crochet stitches in the next 14 stitches, and then come back to the video. I've just made 14 double crochet stitches. Now we're going to work into the chain 2 space, and we're going to do the exact same thing we did when we worked into the first chain 2 space. Into this chain 2 space, we are going to make 3 double crochet stitches. There's 3. Now chain 2, 1, 2, and into the same chain 2 space, make 3 more double crochet stitches. There's 3. These are the steps that we are going to complete a total of 3 times. We've now completed these steps once, and we need to complete them a total of 3 times. So we need to repeat these steps 2 more times. As you go do that, remember that the first step is to skip the next stitch. You're not working in to the very next stitch. You start making your 14 double crochet stitches in the next stitch. You go ahead and complete these steps a total of 3 times, or 2 more times than what we just did, and then come back to the video. I've now completed these steps 3 times. Once again, we are going to skip the next stitch. We are not working into the top of the next stitch. We are going to be working into the next stitch, and we are going to double crochet in the last 6 stitches. Skipping the next stitch, in the next stitch, make our first of 6, and double crochet in the last 6 stitches. Here's my last stitch. At the end of this round, you should have 80 stitches. That's not counting the starting chain 2 or any of the chain 2s made in the corners. To finish the round, we're going to work into the top of the first double crochet stitch that we made in this round. Working in the top of this first stitch, we are going to slip stitch to join. We can now fasten off our yarn, meaning to remove our hook, cut the yarn that's attached to your skein, and pull the end through the loop that was on your hook, and pull tight. Now with your yarn needle, weave in all your loose ends. And now you have a new snowflake square. We have now made one square. You go ahead and repeat these instructions until you have a total of 25 squares. Before we get to joining, now is the time when you can block your squares. Blocking can help correct any curling and help shape your work. To block your finished squares, pin them on blocking boards with rust-proof pins, or use a granny square blocking board, spray them with water, and leave them to dry. Whether or not you block your squares is a personal preference. Some people like to block their squares before joining, and others prefer to block their finished blanket. And some don't block at all. I blocked all my squares before joining, and I blocked my finished blanket. Now we're going to assemble and join the squares together. The first step is to lay out all your squares as shown in these images. For joining and the rest of the pattern, use an H hook and color A. For the next part of the video tutorial, you will see a different granny square in the video. I'm reusing some footage from my flower granny square blanket tutorial for this joining explanation. The instructions, though, are exactly the same. Just ignore the hook and the square shown in the video and follow along the joining instructions, as it's exactly what you do in this snowflake blanket. You want to ensure that the front or right side of each square is facing up. So this is the back. We want the back to be face down. Here's the back. Make sure the back is face down so the front or right sides are facing up. It doesn't matter which direction the tops and bottoms are pointing towards. You can make the squares be any direction you'd like, as long as the right side or front is facing up. So this square right here is the starting square. This is square A. I like to put a stitch marker in square A's chain 2 space right here. This just helps me remember which is the starting square. How we're going to be joining the squares is by first joining all the squares in columns. So we're going to join the squares vertically first, and then we're going to join the squares horizontally and work in rows. In the written instructions, you'll see a legend where I've labeled each square. We're always going to be working on 2 squares at a time. So for now, we're going to take square A and square B. In the written instructions, the first square listed should always be on your right. So the instructions for the first column say to join square B and square A, and square A should be on your left. The first thing we're going to do is make a slip knot. And then place that slip knot on your hook and pull tight. We're always going to start working into the square on our right. In this first case, it's square B. And then we work into the square on our left, which is square A. We're going to start by working into the second of 2 chain stitches that were made in the corner. We are not going to work into this first chain. We're going to work into the second chain, and we're going to be working into the outer loop. This is the loop that is furthest away from the inside of our work, or the inside of the square. So this loop here is the inner loop, and this loop here is the outer loop. And we're going to be working in the outer loops all the way up the square. We're going to start by inserting our hook into this second chain into the outer loop. So we have our yarn on our hook, and I'm going to move the working yarn so it's in between the 2 squares. Starting with the square on my right, I'm going to insert my hook into that second chain in the outer loop, and I'm inserting my hook from right to left, so my hook's going to come out in between the two squares. So inserting my hook into the outer loop of that second chain, and now I have 2 loops on my hook. This is my tail here from where I made the slip knot and attached it to my hook, and my working yarn is under the square there where I've just inserted my hook. Now we're going to work into the square on our left. We're also going to work into the second chain, into the outer loop of the second of 2 chain stitches in the corner. The outer loop on this square is the one that's furthest away from the inside of our square. So here is the inner loop. We're never going to work into the inner loops while we're joining, always working into the outer loop. So here's the outer loop of the second chain stitch, and we're going to insert our hook into that second chain stitch into the outer loop. Keeping our working yarn under our hook and under the loops on our hook, I'm going to pick up the square on my left, find that outer loop of that second chain and insert my hook from left to right. So it comes out in the middle or in between the 2 squares. I'm just going to pull my working yarn to make sure tension's good. Pick it up here. My working yarn is under all of the loops on my hook. Now I'm simply going to yarn over with the working yarn and pull the yarn through all 3 loops on my hook. There's 1, 2, and 3. And there is our first flat slip stitch made. We're going to be working into the outer loops all the way up, and we're always going to be working into the corresponding stitches on each square. So the next stitch we'll be working into is the top of this first double crochet stitch into the outer loop, and that's on the right square. And on the left square, it's going to be the top of this double crochet stitch into the outer loop here. So when we're talking about corresponding stitches, it's the first stitch of the right and the first stitch of the left. Making sure our working yarn is in between the 2 squares and always under our loops. We're going to insert our hook on the outer loop of that first stitch, going from right to left, so the hook's in the middle of our squares and our working yarn is under that hook. Now we're going to go into the outer loop of the left square, going from right to left, so the hook comes out in the middle. There's our 3 loops on our hook. Our working yarn is under our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull it through all 3 loops. There's our second flat slip stitch. Now it's very, very important that we don't make these stitches too tight. If we make them too tight, it's going to pull on our work. So you want to keep your tension very, very, very loose. If you find that you're crocheting too tightly, feel free to go up a full hook size, because it's that important that we make these flat slip stitches very loosely. Now let's go into the second stitch. Here's the second double crochet stitch, working into the outer loop, never the inner loop, not that one, the outer loop. We're going to insert our hook into that stitch on the right square, and on the left square here, working into the outer loop of the next stitch, we'll make our next flat slip stitch. So working from right to left, now working into the left square, into the outer loop only, always making sure your working yarn is under those loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull the working yarn through all 3 loops. And we're going to do this all the way up. As you join your squares, at one point you're going to come across the joining slip stitch. This is the slip stitch that joined the final round, and it's this little bump here that sticks out a bit. Whenever you come across this joining slip stitch, you are going to skip over it. Don't try to work into it. You are going to just pretend like it doesn't exist. This is true for when you join your squares and when you add the border. You're just going to completely ignore this joining slip stitch. You're going to work into the stitch before it and the stitch after it. But when you see this little bump here, just skip right over it. So simply working in the outer loop of the next stitch and the outer loop of the next stitch, then yarn over and pull through. Continue doing this all the way up, always working into the corresponding stitches until you get to the 2 chain stitches that are at the tops of the 2 squares, and we'll do those together. I'm almost finished making flat slip stitches all the way up. I have one more stitch to work into before we get to the chains. So this is my last stitch here. I'm going to work into the outer loop of this stitch, the top of this stitch on the right square. And here's the last stitch. We're going to work into the outer loop of this stitch from the left square. Now I'm at the place where there's 2 chain stitches. When we're working in columns here and joining the squares vertically, we're only going to work into the outer loops of the first of 2 chains. So this is this chain right here, and we're only going to work into the outer loop of that chain and the outer loop of this chain right here. Here's the outer loop. We're not going to work into this second chain. So we're not going to work into that, only work into the outer loops of the first chain. Insert our hook into the outer loop of that first chain on the right square and insert our hook into the outer loop of the first chain on the left square. Yarn over and pull that yarn through all 3 loops on our hook. That completes joining squares B and A. Now we're going to join the next 2 squares in our column. We're still on column 1 here. As you can see in the legend, next we're going to join square G and square F. Square G is on our right and square F is on our left. We're going to start by working into the second of 2 chain stitches on square G, the square on our right. Once again, and for the rest of joining, we're always going to be working into the outer loops. So working into the outer loop of the second of 2 chain stitches, and on the left square, the exact same thing. Find those 2 chain stitches, working into the outer loop of the second of 2 chain stitches, and we're going to work into that outer loop. So I'm continuing exactly where I left off. I haven't fastened off. I'm still using the exact same yarn. I'm going to pick up this next square and insert my hook into the outer loop of that second chain stitch. And it might take a little work just to get everything nice and tight, but not too tight. Make sure everything's nice and secure. So I've inserted my hook into the outer loop, and now I have 2 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to pick up the square on my left and insert my hook into the second chain stitch into the outer loop, making sure that my hook is coming out in between the 2 squares. I now have 3 loops on my hook. Pick up my yarn. My yarn is under my hook and under the 3 loops on my hook. Just tighten everything up here, yarn over, and pull that yarn through all 3 loops. Sometimes especially for this first one, you might need to just help it along. And there's our first flat slip stitch of joining the next 2 squares. Now we're going to work into the corresponding stitches all the way up. By corresponding, I mean working into the first stitch here, the top of this double crochet stitch into the outer loop. We're going to join that to the top of the first double crochet stitch on the other square, also into that outer loop. So working into the outer loop of the corresponding stitches, yarn over, pull that yarn through all 3 loops. And we're going to do that all the way up, always working into the corresponding stitches, making sure your stitches are nice and loose. And you're just simply going to do that all the way up until you get to the 2 chain stitches. I've made my flat slip stitches all the way up into each of the corresponding stitches on each square. I'm now at the 2 chains at the top. Every time we join 2 squares at the top of the squares, we're going to work into the first chain only, into this outer loop. Here are the 2 chain stitches. We're only going to work into this first chain and into the outer loop of that first chain. Join that chain to the outer loop of the first of 2 chain stitches on the other square. So insert your hook into the outer loop of that first chain and the outer loop of the first chain on the other square. Yarn over and pull that yarn through all 3 loops. Now that we've joined squares G and F, we're going to join the next 2 squares in the column. And we're going to do the exact same thing that we just did. So feel free to watch this video again because the steps are exactly the same. Where to work into the chain stitches at the start and where to work into the chain stitches at the top are exactly the same for joining each square in each column. So next you will join squares L and K, and then Q and P, and then V and U. Let's just pretend these are my last 2 squares in column 1. After you've finished working into the first chain only, so nothing changes, you'll always end by working into the first chain only, leave that second chain unworked. But at the very end of the column, so after your last 2 squares, what you're going to do is fasten off. So you're simply going to cut your yarn and pull the tail through the loop that was on your hook. That completes the instructions for column 1. Then we're going to do the exact same thing we did for column 1 for all the rest of the columns. So next you'll be doing column 2 and joining square C to square B, and then move up and join squares H and G and continue doing this all the way up until the end of column 2, and then join all the squares in column 3 and column 4. You're going to make a slip knot, place it on your hook, and follow the exact same instructions that we just did for column 1 for all the other columns in this blanket. After completing all of the columns, we're going to now start the rows. We're going to rotate our work so that we can start on row 1. And we're going to start in this direction where our starting square is here. Here's our stitch marker in the starting square, square A's, chain 2 space. So we're rotating our work, and starting square A should be on our right and on the bottom. And we're going to start row 1 by joining square A and square F. Just like the columns, the instructions for each row are exactly the same. So this is what you're going to be doing for each row. We're going to start by making a slip knot and placing it on our hook. The first 2 squares of each row are slightly different than the instructions for the rest of the row, and this is all highlighted in the written instructions. For the first 2 squares of each row, we're only going to work into the second of the 2 chains. So you should be nice and familiar with these 2 chains by now. We're only going to work into the second one. We're not going to work into the first. And once again, for all working every single stitch, we're only working once again into the outer loop. So not the inner loop, always working into this outer loop. We're going to start by working into the second of 2 chain stitches on both squares. We've got our slip knot on our hook, and I'm going to move my working yarn so it's between my squares. I'm going to insert my hook into the outer loop of the second chain and the outer loop of the second chain from the other square, making sure my working yarn is underneath those 3 loops, yarn over and pull that yarn through all 3 loops. And now we're going to work into the corresponding stitches into the outer loops always of each stitch all the way up until we get to the chain stitches. I'm nearing the 2 chain stitches. I have 1 stitch left to work into before I get to those chain stitches. So here's my last stitch that I'll work into before the 2 chains. Here's my last stitch. So just still working into outer loops of both of those stitches. It just can get a little awkward, but still do the exact same thing. So there's my last stitch before the chain stitches. So let's find these chain stitches here. This is the first chain stitch of the 2 chain stitches made at the corner of the square. And we're going to be working into this outer loop right here. And it can get a little small, but we still want to work into this outer loop of the first chain stitch. This is the stitch that hasn't been worked in. We've already worked into the other chain when we joined the columns, but now we're going to be working into this unworked chain stitch. Here it is on the right square, and here is the chain stitch on the left square. We're going to work into the outer loop of this chain right here. So working into this outer loop, insert your hook, and then work into the outer loop of the chain on the other side. I needed to use my nails to get this. Making sure your yarn is still under those 3 loops, yarn over, pull it through. So now we've just joined the first of 2 chain stitches at the ends of each square, and that's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the rows. Every time you work on 2 squares, at the very end of joining the 2 squares, before we get to this point, you're only going to work into the first of 2 chain stitches. You're going to do that for every time you're joining 2 squares. Next, we're going to be doing something now for the rest of the row. Remember when we started the row, we worked into the second of 2 chain stitches. Now we're going to be doing something different for the rest of the row. But remember, these instructions are the exact same for each row. So the starting 2 squares are slightly different, and now we're doing something else we're going to do for the rest of the row. Now what we're going to do is work over the column. So we're just going to skip over it. We are not working into any of the flat slip stitches we made when we made our column. We're going to be working into the 2 chain stitches on the next 2 squares. And for the rest of the row, every time you work into 2 squares, you're going to start by working into the first of 2 chain stitches. Now this chain stitch has already been worked in. We're going to find the outer loop, which is right here, and we're still going to work into that, the outer loops of both of these first 2 chain stitches, and we're going to make our first flat slip stitch into that stitch. And then we're going to work into the second chain. But let's start by working over the column, not into the column stitches, but into this outer loop. We'll insert our hook from the right square and into the outer loop of the first chain from the left square. That's where we'll make our first flat slip stitch. So working over the column, insert your hook into the outer loop of that first chain, even though it's already been worked in. Insert your hook into the outer loop of the corresponding chain stitch, making sure your yarn is under, yarn over, and pull that yarn through all 3 loops. And there's our first flat slip stitch, and you can see the row goes over the column. Now we're going to work into the second chain stitch. It's again in the outer loop and the outer loop of this second chain stitch. These chain stitches have not yet been worked into. So working into the outer loop of the chain stitch. And now we're going to go back to working into the corresponding stitches of each of the 2 squares all the way until the second 2 chain stitches. Now I'm at the 2 chain stitches at the tops of the 2 squares, and we're always only going to work into the first of 2 chain stitches at the top. So working into this first chain stitch to the outer loop, and the first chain stitch on the other square. You're going to repeat these instructions for the rest of the row. Remember that every time you join more squares in the row, you're going to follow the same steps that we did when we went over the column, and you're going to keep doing this for all the squares in the row. So in row 1, we just finished joining squares B and G. So next you'll join squares C and H, and then D and I, and finally E and J. Once you've joined all the squares in the row, you're going to fasten off and then pull the tail through the loop that was on your hook. And then you're going to repeat the exact same instructions that we just did for row 1 for all the other rows. So next you'll start row 2 and join squares F and K, and then G and L and all the other squares in row 2, and then join all the squares in row 3 and row 4. After you finish joining, don't weave in your loose ends yet. Wait until we do the border. Once you've joined all the squares, we're going to start border round 1. Once again, you're going to see my flower granny square, but the instructions for border round 1 are exactly the same. Continue using an H hook, and for the border, I used color A or white for the entire border. We're going to start by attaching yarn in the starting squares chain 2 space where the stitch marker is. You can now remove the stitch marker. We want to ensure that the right side of your blanket is facing you. Working into this chain 2 space, not into the chain stitches, but right into the space, insert your hook, place a new strand of yarn on your hook, pull it through, and now we're going to make a slip stitch. It might be a little loose, but it'll tighten up once we weave in our loose ends. Into the same space, not into the chain stitches, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches. So working right into the space, there's my second and third single crochet stitch into the chain 2 space, and this is our first corner. I'm going to rotate my work so it's easier to see here. Now we're going to be making single crochet stitches into the tops of each double crochet stitch. So simply work into the top of each stitch and make 1 single crochet stitch. And you're going to do that in the top of each double crochet stitch all the way around. As you're working on the border, if you ever come across the joining slip stitch that joined the final round of the square, here's the joining slip stitch here. It's a little bump that looks a little different from regular stitches. If you ever come across this, you're just going to skip over it. You're not going to work into it. You'll work into the stitch before and the stitch after and just skip over this joining slip stitch. So you'll work in the stitch before it, skip over it, and then work into the stitch after it. And then return to making regular single crochet stitches into the tops of double crochet stitches until you approach where the 2 squares are joined. So I'm approaching where the 2 squares are joined. I have 1 last double crochet stitch left to work into. So this is the top of this stitch here. So since it's a double crochet stitch, I'm going to make a regular single crochet stitch under both loops of this double crochet stitch here. And these are the instructions that you're going to follow every time you work on where 2 squares are joined. You're going to do the same thing. We're coming up, this is our first square. So I've just made my last single crochet stitch in the top of this last double crochet stitch before the join. Now we have our 2 chain stitches. On this first square, we're going to work into the front loop only of the first chain stitch on this first square. So insert your hook into the front loop only of this first chain stitch, and this is the chain stitch that hasn't been worked into yet. So insert your hook and make a single crochet stitch in the front loop only. So working into the first chain stitch, insert your hook into the front loop only and single crochet. When looking at this first square still, there's the second chain stitch right here, and it's already been worked into. We're going to skip this second chain stitch from the first square. We're also going to skip the join line. We're not going to do anything with the join line, so leave that as is. Now we're going to talk about the second square, and this is always going to apply. So even though we're talking right now literally about the first square and the second square, when you come up to the next time 2 squares are joined, the first square is always the first square and the second square is always the second square all the way around. So this is the first square. We're going to skip the second chain stitch, skip the join line, and now let's look at this second square. Here's the first chain stitch, and it's already been worked into when we made our join line, and we're going to work into the back loop only of this first chain stitch. Even though it's already been worked into, we're still going to make a single crochet stitch by inserting our hook right here and making a single crochet stitch, skipping over that second chain and the join line, going into the second square, insert your hook into the back loop only of this first chain and make a single crochet. Now we're going to work into the second chain, And this time we're going to work into the front loop only of this second chain. Insert your hook into the second chain into the front loop only and make a single crochet. So you can see we did not work into the chain 2 spaces. We worked into the front loop only of this first chain, skip the second chain, skip the join line, work in the back loop only of this first chain of the second square, and work into the front loop only of the second chain of the second square. Now we're going to return to making single crochet stitches into the tops of double crochet stitches all the way to the next time where the 2 squares are joined. So you're going to do this all the way around. There's one other exception I want to note, and it's about the corners. So every corner, and there's only going to be 3 remaining corners, and I want to differentiate between what a corner is and these corner chain 2 spaces. This is where 2 squares are joined, and the instructions are the same for every time you come across where 2 squares are joined. But we have 3 remaining corners left in the blanket, and you're going to do the same thing at each corner. If you recall, when we started, we made 3 single crochet stitches into the chain 2 space, and that's exactly what we're going to do at the 3 remaining corners. So when you come up on any corner, there's 3 left, you're going to do the same thing. Here I am at the next corner. Here's the chain 2 space, and at the 3 remaining corners, we are not going to work into the chain stitches. We're going to work into the chain 2 space and make 3 single crochet stitches into this chain 2 space. Working right into the space. There's 1, 2, and 3. Those are the instructions that you're going to repeat all the way around. When you are back at the first single crochet stitch made in the round, come back to the video and we will finish the round together. After working all the way around, we're going to slip stitch into the top of the first single crochet stitch made in the round to join. I'm now going to show you how to do border round 2. First thing we're going to do is chain 1 and turn. We are going to skip the first stitch. This is the stitch that we just slip stitched into, the stitch that's attached to that chain 1. We are not working into this. This is actually the joining slip stitch that joined the previous round, and this stitch never gets worked into. We're going to start by working in the next stitch. And this is actually where we begin the repeat portion of the round, and this marks the first step in a set of instructions that we are going to be completing a total of 4 times. This is our first step. Into this next stitch, we are going to slip stitch. You may find it helpful to place a stitch marker in the top of this first slip stitch to mark the start of the round. Now we're going to work into the next stitch and make a half double crochet stitch. And we are going to be repeating in the next stitch, slip stitch, in the next stitch, half double crochet, all the way to the corner stitch. But until you get to the corner stitch, you're just going to repeat in the next stitch, slip stitch, in the next stitch, half double crochet, and repeat those 2 steps until you get to the corner stitch. The corner stitch is the middle of 3 single crochet stitches you made in the corner chain 2 space. You continue repeating those steps until you get to the stitch before the corner stitch. Repeat these steps all the way till right before the corner stitch and then come back to the video. I've just repeated those steps and I'm now at the stitch before the corner stitch. You want the stitch before the corner stitch to be a half double crochet stitch. If your pattern's working out that you can repeat those steps and your stitch before the corner is a half double crochet, wonderful. Now you can proceed to the corner stitch instructions. However, in my situation, how my stitches worked out, I have a half double crochet stitch here, and now my stitch before the corner, if I continue the exact steps, is going to be a slip stitch. So I am going to continue and I'm going to make my slip stitch because I'm following that pattern. Here's my half double crochet. In the next stitch, make a slip stitch. But since we want the stitch before the corner to be a half double crochet stitch, what we're going to do is make a half double crochet stitch in the same stitch that we just made that slip stitch in. So now I'm going to make a half double crochet in the same stitch. Now I can work into the corner stitch. Into this corner stitch, we're going to do 3 things all in the same stitch. First thing we're going to do is slip stitch. Still in the same stitch, now we're going to make a half double crochet stitch. And now we're going to make a slip stitch. We've just made a slip stitch, half double crochet, and slip stitch all in the corner stitch. Now we're going to work into the next stitch, the stitch after that corner stitch, and make a half double crochet stitch. In the next stitch, make a half double crochet. These are the steps you're going to complete a total of 4 times. We've just completed those steps once. You need to repeat those instructions 3 more times. So you're going to make a slip stitch in the next stitch, followed by a half double crochet in the next stitch, and just keep repeating slip stitch, half double crochet, all the way to the next corner stitch. Once again, in the stitch before the corner stitch, you want it to be a half double crochet. If yours is a slip stitch, simply add a half double crochet stitch in the same stitch as the slip stitch. Then in the corner stitch, you will make a slip stitch, half double crochet, and then another slip stitch. Working in the stitch after the corner stitch, make a half double crochet stitch. That will be the second time you've repeated those steps, and you need to complete those steps a total of 4 times. You go ahead and do that and then come back to the video. I've just completed those instructions a total of 4 times. After working into the 4th and final corner, I worked into the next stitch, which is the last stitch, and made a half double crochet stitch. Now I'm ready to join. And to finish the round, we're going to work into the first stitch. This is the stitch with the stitch marker. I'm now going to remove this marker, and we're going to work into the top of this first slip stitch. Working into the top of this first slip stitch to join. Now we can fasten off our yarn. And with our yarn needle, we can now weave in all our loose ends. As you're weaving in your loose ends, you can use the tails from joining to fix any gaps between joining and the border. And what I mean by that is there's right there, I see a little gap, and as I weave in this loose end, I can just put that directly into the gap. And then working into the back, with my yarn needle, I will just weave this end around that gap to tighten it up. And you can repeat this as many times as needed. Just weave your end in around the gap, going back and forth, and secure this loose end to the back of your work, hiding it under stitches. And once you're happy with the placement and also how it looks from the front, you can now cut your tail. And you can repeat that whenever there's a gap between joining and the border. After you finish weaving in all your loose ends, you'll now have a new Snowflake Granny Square Blanket. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoy making this blanket. If you have any questions or if there's anything at all I can do to help, please let me know. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.